Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. The program Focal Point, the network, American Family Radio Talk Network, AFR Talk. Good friend of this program, Scott Lively, is in the crosshairs again for his stand for biblical truth on homosexual behavior. Scott Lively, as you may remember, is the author of the book, The Pink Swastika, that talks about the link between homosexuality and the Nazi movement. Nazi movement founded in a gay bar in Munich and so forth and so on. Now, Scott Lively, who is an American pastor, went to Uganda in 2009, and he delivered there a series of talks explaining a biblical view of homosexuality. He never once advocated any violence against homosexuals. In fact, he actually argued against the death penalty in Uganda's criminal code dealing with homosexuality, despite the fact that there were lawmakers in Uganda that wanted that provision included. Scott Lively actually argued against that, and it did not make it into the final version of the bill on homosexual conduct. At any rate, there is an organization, abbreviation SMUG, S-M-U-G, Sexual Minorities Uganda is the complete name of that group, and they have filed a lawsuit against Scott Lively, charging him under something called the Alien Tort Statute, Alien Tort Statute, of committing crimes against humanity. That's what Scott Lively has been charged with in a federal court in the United States of America for talks that he gave in Uganda, giving a biblical view of homosexuality. Here to help us kind of sort through some of this is Horatio Mehet, who is senior litigation counsel with the Liberty Counsel. And Horatio, just had your boss, Matt Staver, on in the first hour, but welcome back. You've been a guest on this program before. Horatio Mehet, senior litigation counsel, Liberty Counsel. Welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Thank you, Brian, for having us with you today. It's a busy time litigating these important issues.
Boy, and Liberty Counsel right in the trenches, on the front lines, doing outstanding work as a First Amendment law firm, public interest law firm, defending religious liberty. Well, Horatio, let's talk about this deal. I mean, first of all, this is a pretty remarkable accusation on the part of Scott Lively's opponents that he would be guilty of committing crimes against humanity.
That's right, Brian. These are the same laws and the same types of charges that were brought against the Nazi war criminals for the gas chambers at Auschwitz. Truly the worst of the worst international human rights crimes are being now levied against Scott Lively for doing, as you pointed out, nothing more than espousing verbally a biblical view on homosexuality.
Now, let me ask you a question. Well, let's talk about this Alien Tort Statute first of all. It seems to me that Scott Lively's opponents are misusing this statute. They're using it for purposes that actually are expressly prohibited. Talk to us about that.
Yes, the Supreme Court just this year issued a very seminal and important decision on the Alien Tort Statute, in which it held that the statute cannot be used to bring in the United States court alleged crimes and torts that took place outside of the United States. The statute was passed way back in 1789, at the beginning of our nation, to give foreign people who visit our country and who are hurt in our country an avenue to bring those claims to the court. So the Supreme Court this year has said that the statute cannot be used for claims and for conduct that took place outside of the United States on foreign soil. That is exactly the type of conduct and the type of claim that SMUG is attempting to bring in this case, and that ought to be foreclosed by the Supreme Court's recent decision.
Now, it seems to me pretty remarkable what Scott's opponents are doing here, his legal opponents are doing here, because what he did in Uganda was not a crime in Uganda. In fact, Uganda was debating policies regarding homosexual behavior. They adopted policies that actually make homosexual behavior contrary to public policy. You've got the president of Uganda has publicly and openly confessed the sins of sexual immorality and dedicated his nation to God. So clearly what Scott did in Uganda was not criminal behavior. We still have freedom of speech in the United States of America. So what he did in Uganda wouldn't be a crime if he'd done the same thing in the United States. So it just seems to be remarkable that they are pursuing legal redress here.
That's right. What they're attempting to do is to bring in, through this alien tort statute, to bring in this amorphous notion of international law. Some countries, some places have decided to make advocacy against homosexual conduct unlawful, and so now they want to bring those limited decisions in under this aura of international law norms and to foist those rulings upon U.S. citizens under the U.S., trumping in the process our United States Constitution and our sovereignty. Nothing less is at stake here than the sovereignty of the United States Constitution.
Because we understand, Horatio, and it's embedded in the Constitution and in the way we approach law, that the United States Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and this would be completely subverting that if they are successful in their legal complaint.
Well, absolutely right. I mean, think about it. Americans have the right to be engaged in the political process on both sides of the issue of homosexuality, or take any other hot-button issue of the day. What the other side is trying to do here, essentially, is to transform any American citizen that would dare engage themselves on this issue, for example, advocating for a law like Proposition 8 or any other marriage amendment in a state. They would have those citizens declared international war crime or war criminals. They would accuse them of committing human rights violations for doing nothing more than injecting themselves in the public square. Up until now, that concept would have been anathema under our Constitution and our First Amendment process.
So it seems, Horatio, again, and to kind of look at the larger implications here about the threat that this represents to religious liberty, if a lawsuit against Scott Lively moves forward, if it makes progress, if it goes up the judicial kind of chain, based on the accusation that he had committed a crime against humanity, then there isn't any reason why Liberty University or the American Family Association or I myself, or things I've said on this program, could not be charged in court with committing a crime against humanity. So if this suit is successful, it seems to me it jeopardizes the liberty of every American pastor, well, just every American, to speak honestly and in defense of biblical values on matters of homosexual conduct.
I think that's right. That's the real danger here, and without a doubt, that is the real objective of SMUG, the plaintiff in this case, and the Center for Constitutional Rights, the George Soros-funded group that is pursuing their claim in this case. That's the end game here, and that is what is at stake in this case.
Now, let me give you ask you to comment on one other thing. There's a lot of rumblings that the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, ENDA for short, is going to be reintroduced in Congress. They're going to try to push this thing through. This would provide basically criminal penalties at the end game for someone who would take homosexual behavior into consideration in hiring and firing decisions, personnel decisions, and all that sort of thing. So it represents a huge threat to freedom of association, freedom of religion, and all that kind of thing. But it would seem to me, talking here with Horatio Mehet from Liberty Counsel, who's defending Scott Lively on a charge he committed a crime against humanity by teaching biblical views of homosexuality in Uganda. But it seemed to me you could get to the point here, Horatio, say if ENDA comes up in the United States Senate or the Congress for debate, that anybody who actually testifies against ENDA, that tries to work against ENDA, that speaks out against ENDA, I mean, it seems to me they then could be subject to a criminal prosecution that they too were violating. They were committing crimes against humanity simply by trying to defeat this law.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. If you read the complaint against Scott Lively, they accuse him of working with pro-family leaders in Uganda to resist laws that would normalize homosexuality and homosexual conduct, such as employment non-discrimination laws. That's the charge they're bringing against him. And so if that is allowed to succeed in the Scott Lively case, then I think you're absolutely right. The very next and logical step would be to take anyone that would oppose legislation like ENDA in the U.S. and to have them charged with international human rights violations, the most heinous of crimes, crimes against humanity of persecution, for doing nothing more than exercising their right to speak their mind on an issue of public importance in the public square.
So,
At
Horatio,
some point, we have to ask ourselves, are we still a free country governed by a constitution with a First Amendment, or are we entering an era of fascism when it comes to this issue?
last question, Horatio, what is the timeline here? When is this case going to be heard? When we can expect to hear more about the actual legal affairs in this case, the legal action in this case?
So the court has just recently decided that the case would be allowed to proceed forward, that it would not be dismissed at an early stage. And the court has set a scheduling conference for late September, at which time it will decide a specific discovery schedule leading up to and including a trial. So that's all we know at this point, but we will know more in the near future.
Our guest has been Horatio Meehat, Senior Litigation Counsel at Liberty Counsel, representing Scott Lively, who is now being forced to defend himself in court against a charge that he's committed crimes against humanity for doing nothing more than defending a biblical view of homosexuality. Very sobering. Horatio, thank you for being with us, and we look forward to chatting with you again as this case progresses.
Thank you, Brian. God bless you.
God bless you. Focal Point AFR Talk. We'll be right back with more of your calls and more content. Stay with us. Focal Point AFR Talk.